Thank you, thank you. Once again, please give it up for Rosario, Melinda, and Fatumata. I, I told you that today was all about solutions, and we've heard one of the solutions, or some of the solutions there in that incredible session. You know, the way the world is at the moment, it feels like we're stuck. It feels like we're stuck. It feels like we're not moving where we should be. There's so many things clogging it up, and one of the answers I heard today is invest in women. If we invest in women, we can unclog the world and change things. Invest. I'm going to move on to our next guest, and while they've met many times before, never have they shared the stage publicly before. So I'd really like you to put your hands together and give a warm welcome to the UN Deputy Secretary General, Amina J, Mohammed, Prime Minister and co-chair UN SDG advocate Mia Mottley, and co-founder of World Data Lab, Homi Kharas, to the stage.
Well, what a wonderful treat it is to be with, two of the most inspirational people on this issue of investment. Nothing's going to happen without investment.
That's right.
Both of you have been real leaders in this. DSG, you've been the architect of the Sustainable Development Goals. You've been the mover of the SDG stimulus plan. You've talked a lot about international financial architecture reform. Prime Minister, you've been spearheading the Bridgetown Initiative. You've created political momentum and given a voice to developing countries in a way they've never had before. It's a massive pleasure to have you both on the stage. So I wanted to start actually with you, Prime Minister, because you're dealing with real people. You're dealing with real problems. No. We're just that's just the talk shop, you know.
I asked you to be nice.
Yeah. So tell us. You have a program. You have an agreement with the IMF, Barbados. It's a country with significant levels of debt. You've got a program. You say you're going to run 3.4% primary surplus every year to bring your debt levels down, yet your people are demanding all kinds of other things. How do you balance these two kinds of this tension between doing what you feel you want to do for the people and yet maintaining a certain amount of discipline in your overall accounts?
It's challenging, there's no doubt about it. And when we came to office, Barbados was the third most indebted country in the world, debt to GDP per capita. And within 1 week, we determined that we had to restructure our debt. And mercifully, I was not subject to a common framework. If not, I'd be dead. And that's the first thing I want to say, because the common framework is not working. And as Amina said this morning earlier, it's not transparent. We set about the task of restructuring our domestic and external debt. And the month after we finished, COVID came. And we were then confronted with a second structural adjustment as a result of being a highly tourism-dependent country when people could not move. We have argued that you're asking us to choose, as Hobson's choice, to choose between running a primary surplus as steep as we are, to bring our debt down to the artificial number of 60%, which is observed in the breach by most of the developed world now. At the same time that I'm required to build resilience from roofs to reefs in order to minimize loss. It's nice to talk about a loss and damage fund, and we certainly believe that those who contributed should help pay for loss. But we would much rather avert loss than recover from loss. And therefore, the access to long-term funding to be able to build resilience is critical. But at the same time, we know we can't separate planet from people, and that's why, Amina, I think you keep making the point that, and sometimes I'm guilty of it, of pointing it out, but you keep making the point that climate is part of the SDGs. Why? Because we may save the planet and lose the people. And the bottom line is that the Caribbean, for example, has one of the highest homicide rates per capita in the world. But nobody studies that because of our idyllic appearance. If we are going to stop people, guns don't talk and guns don't walk. So how do you stop people from using guns? You got to give them education, you got to give them opportunity. If at the same time that I'm trying to build out my coastal infrastructure to stop aquifers from being spoiled forever because of saltwater intrusion, I can't spend money on building schools or building hospitals. And all of this within a time frame of at most a decade. How am I going to make it? How are we going to avoid climate migration? How are we going to avoid societal implosion? You can bring back down debt overnight, but you can't reverse societal implosion or the ravages of war or conflict in under a generation. And we all know this, but we continue to pretend as if it doesn't matter. And as I said this morning, that there's a tolerance for the loss of life and the marginalization of societies. And let us not forget, don't be arrogant about feeling that civilizations can't fall or species can't become extinct, because we've seen dinosaurs move from us. I haven't seen one recently, other than some political ones. And we have seen failed civilizations. So the notion that in the 21st century we cannot become a failed civilization or failed humanity is unbelievable.
So just very quickly, a lot of people say, well, yes, I mean, of course we want to do all of these things, but do you really have what they call shovel-ready projects? I mean, things
Absolutely.
that you could do
Absolutely.
immediately.
Can you find me $200 million now to do the expansion of my hospital that is not 15-year money? I need 40, 50-year money. I've said to you, look, remodel all my debt and stretch it out to 50 years. All that is incurred for SDGs. I'm not asking you for other things. What will be the implications for my debt service? When we came to office, we had 68 cents in debt service. That's why we had to restructure it. I feel for Zambia. How the hell do you take 3 years to restructure debt? You can't do that and still meet the needs of ordinary people.
So DSG, Zambia, common framework. I mean, you've been talking to all these finance ministers here this week who are here. Do you hear the same story from all of them? Are they all in this feeling the same kind of pinch? And what do they say we can do to help?
I think, thank you, and very much the same line that Mia has been speaking to as a small island state. They speak to as low-income countries, they speak to as landlocked countries or middle-income countries, all these acronyms that we put on countries. But in the end, it's about the frustration that they don't matter as much as the rest of the world does when it comes to recovering and to getting the resources needed for people and for what clearly is no fault of many vulnerable and developing nations, the state of the planet. And they're ready to make the commitments. And I have to say, we have been building capacity and we've been producing plans, and everything that has been asked of developing countries has happened. And so I think the frustration they have is that, so what is it going to take that we will have the same level of response as countries in the developed world with far more capacity have had in response to COVID, in response to the war in Ukraine, in response to the geopolitical tensions that we see now that are bleeding into every conversation that we have. And that's, address our debt. There is nobody saying they're not going to pay it, but what they need not to do is to have a choiceless choice between paying that debt and saying, I can't spend on education and health. Is there a nation in the developed world that is going to tell their people they're not going to pay for education for the next 5 years? By the way, 3 years even to get to a discussion that says that we need to do that. So I think we are not providing the instruments that we know we can. The capacity in the world today that knows what is happening, where it's happening, how it's happening, is enormous. And we've got this wonderful AI thing that can predict all sorts for you for the next 20 years and can respond to your questions in 2 seconds, more than me. And yet we
Actually,
are saying...
it's where I got my questions from.
You see? You see? And so, this is a big issue for people. I was home in Nigeria just a couple of weeks ago, and it's dire. And it's not because they were not doing anything well. Yes, there are always troubles with your governance and the way you handle your macro. But there should be the assistance there to turn around and say 227 million people, 60% under poverty. There should be a response to that. And there really isn't. We go, the next piece is the fiscal space that you need to deal with the problems of young people who feel that they don't have a future, that they can't live a life of dignity, that what they see on the internet and the phones that we have will not be accessible to them because somehow they're a lesser person. And that's really for us very critical. I go again day after tomorrow to Nigeria. It's going to a counterterrorism conference. It's an international one. I know, and from the experiences of Boko Haram, terrorists are not born. I went to school in the same place we have Boko Haram. If we had put the investments at scale and in time, we wouldn't have had this disaffection where there is a better job working for ISIS or ISIL than for building your nations and your communities and your companies. So frustration is real because the instruments are there. The political will, if powered, could do the things that we need to do. So we have to be here. Mia spoke this morning about feeling like a record that's stuck, and I think it's very stuck, and so we begin to feel as though perhaps we've got the wrong message. If we've been thinking, what is this? 2 and 2 is not making 4. But I think we need to amplify that stuck because everything that she is saying has not changed. We haven't made the change, and we're always being put in the place where you say, we're very grateful for what we have received so far. But if it's drip feed and there's no impact, it's only 15% of the SDGs achieved halfway through, how am I going to applaud that? I can't. I can't go back to my member states, the ones that I'm hearing from, to actually say that. And the last thing I think that we're hearing from them is on the climate agenda. And the climate agenda is not different from the development agenda that's in crisis. Both are in crisis right now. As Mia's just said, you can't save the planet and then there are no people on it. You have to do the two together. And the finance itself, climate action is development. If we look at the 17 goals we have, at the very center of it is these three dimensions that we have. One of them is climate. It's the environment. So it is a triple planetary crisis, and we need to address that better. So we're counting on all of the voices that we have in this room, amplify what it is that one is demanding, but we need to ask, at what point as one humanity do we actually respond as one humanity? We need to ask that because right now we're losing our moral compass on several grounds.
It's really, both of you have talked about linking security aspects with development, linking climate aspects with development, that what we're doing right now just isn't working. It's almost as if we're struggling for a really quite different development paradigm. And all of these things were included in the Sustainable Development Goals. It was the first framework that actually had the security and the climate and the people, all together in one framework. But it doesn't seem to have really changed our thinking. And yet, Prime Minister, when, you're there in the Caribbean, one of the most immediate things that you see is that today you have hurricanes, you have storms, you have damage, all of these things that are being created. That never used to happen. So it's a very different kind of system. How are you thinking about what's new? What are the new priorities? What are the things that I now have to do in this quite long list of development actions? How do you change that mindset to say now we just need development to really encompass these, all of these
To
issues?
begin with, you got to see us and listen to us and feel us. Look, we spent 30 years at the WTO trying to argue for special and differential treatment for small states because our share of global trade in goods is 0.000%, and our share of global trade in services is 0.0001%. Cannot distort the global trading system. But no one listened to us. So what happens in Barbados? You had a 22% reduction and a 33% reduction in agriculture and manufacturing. People lost jobs, people lost opportunities. How many more things will have to fall when we say to you that you cannot finance development with 15-year money? At the end of the day, you're not even giving the kids the chance to grow up and to earn a job, to earn a living, to help you pay back for the school that they've built or for the hospital that's been built. And yet, the financial markets are premised on what? Short-term money, short-term gains, short-term everything. At the same time, when real trouble happens, what happened? We were told you can't print money, you can't do quantitative easing. All of a sudden, a few rich countries in the world, when the pandemic hit, printed money like it was going out of style. What's on the front page of the Financial Times today? The IMF is telling the US, China, and the UK that they're running fiscal deficits that are dangerously out of whack. If it was Barbados or other small countries, we'd be told absolutely not. I think what you're hearing from the DSG is that there's an utter frustration with the doublespeak and the lack of capacity to see, hear, and feel people. And it's not just at the level of individual citizens, it's at the level of countries. Now, if you're going to have a new, fair, rules-based order, then there has to be a voice. There has to be representation, but there also has to be deconstruction to remove a lot of rules that don't make sense. And when you deconstruct, you ask, why do we have these rules? What is the public policy we're trying to serve? Because if it's not serving, remove it. And I think that the whole development paradigm is still based very much on an old colonial framework of power relationships. And until we confront that, we're not going to see a difference in the results.
See why I want to be like her when I grow up?
I'm inspired by you.
DSG, look, this week has been all about how the multilateral development banks could do more in terms of providing the kind of finance that the Prime Minister is talking about. And we keep hearing statements that, yes, they're trying to do it. Sometimes they come up with some quite big numbers, but then you discover that these are numbers that are stretched cumulative over 10 years or 20 years. And through multiplication, it's quite easy to make big numbers. But what's your sense of this? Is this going well? Is there more that can be done? Come on, give us the...
This is the side of DSG that you... Am I going to be DSG? Am I going to be Amina Mohammed? In 2015...
Amina Mohammed,
yeah.
could I ask you?
In 2015, we agreed we were going from billions to trillions to deliver on this agenda. We agreed that we weren't going to do a piece of development, just the social dimension. We were going to do it all. And we had a right for all because now we're in this global family that everyone is equal, at least have equal access to do. We're not asking for handouts, right? And those billions to trillions have not happened. We've put on the table, let's talk about, the international financial architecture, which needs changing. You cannot, anything that is designed 75 years ago, shelf life expired, we need to look at it again because today's different from what it was then. And I don't think that we're asking for any less than would have been asked 75 years ago. We've said that it's going to take time because this is power dynamics and no one gives away power. That's fine. We're going to convince you why it is that it's in your interest to let a little go. And we have a short-term look at this. And it is about this SDG stimulus. It's about the Bridgetown Initiative. It's with what we have, what can we do? And even that seems to be impossible. We had a historic issuance of SDR, 650 billion. And vulnerable countries, developing countries, every one of them used it responsibly. And we had great leaning in to create the RST, the Resilience Trust Fund, for SDRs. And that was a great innovation because it tackled middle-income countries. We are now saying that's not enough because we need more. The RST today is less than 5% out the door, but there's a lot of good, engagement, intention, English language. There's a lot of that, but it's not coming out the door, which is what people need now. And we're saying, okay, so you've got MDBs, we trust them. These are vehicles that we know, tried and tested. Can we take 100 billion? That will be leveraged 5 to 7 times. And it's as easily as you did this, can you please do this? It's still not happening. And someone's got to explain to me why that is so. We agree the Europeans can't do it. They've got all sorts of legal hoops and hurdles they have to get through, but there are 6 or 7 countries that can do this. And they're willing to do it, but the signals need to come for that. Has there been a precedent that was set that there is, we should be inclusive and there should be solidarity and justice? Yes, there was. In 1945, the Marshall Plan came about because it recognized that countries needed to get back on their feet, rebuild their institutions, rebuild their infrastructure, invest in their people. And, it's only a few years ago the British finished paying for that debt. How many years is that? And somebody is telling us that we cannot look at 20, 30-year timelines for development. A precedent has been set. We cared about people one time. We should care about them again. And there is no excuse for it. And the time's now.
We're running out of time for this conversation, and we're running out of time for development. Any 30-second last words that you want to leave us with, Prime Minister?
That we have 10 years to build resilience and adaptation. And the longer we take talking about it, the less likely we are to ensure that we can save lives. And that's what's at stake. And that's what bothers me, that all lives matter, not just some.
Do it now. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be better. ESG?
I think we have to go beyond our leaders. We've got some great leaders. I mean, we have some great women that are leading. But this is also about institutions. It's about the men in the institutions and the designs that they've had that they're very comfortable with and will not roll up their sleeves to bring those tools and those solutions to what we need today. And so I think we're in Washington today to say to the institutions that we designed for people, they were not for member states in the charter where we the people, they need to recognize that it is in their own interest for them to do the job that they are hired to do. And that is people, that is planet, and they need to give the reasons to their shareholders, and the shareholding is a little wonky these days in terms of its representation, but they need to be able to say to them, this is no longer sustainable. And we have to change the way we do it. We have the frameworks, we've got the tools, we have the brains, now make it work for people and planet.
We're so grateful to have the two of you speaking truth to power. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.